The first crack of lightning split the sky so violently that even the horses tied outside the canyon mouth screamed. But Jacob Holt didn't flinch. He was too tired to fear anything anymore. For 6 days he had been wandering the desert alone. Skin cracked, lips split, shirt torn open by thorns and wind. He carried nothing except a small leather pouch around his neck, his last memory of his sister, stolen by raiders 3 years earlier. He'd never stopped searching. Rain hammered the stone as Jacob staggered toward a narrow passage, craving shelter. The sky was a black, swirling mass that smelled of iron and electricity, and every breath felt like pulling needles into his lungs. Then he heard it, a whisper of movement, soft, deliberate, not wind out before he could turn. Something slammed into the back of his legs, dropping him to the mud. A second force pressed a blade to his throat. Jacob froze. A woman's voice, low, steady and oddly calm, said behind him, "Move, and your blood will warm this storm." Jacob slowly lifted his head. Around him stood 12 Apache women, half hidden by rain and shadow, their braids soaked, their faces painted with streaks of ash. Their bows were drawn, their blades gleamed, and at the center of them stood the most striking woman he had ever seen. She was tall, broad-shouldered, her bare arms corded with muscle. A long scar cut across her cheek, but it only added to the fierce authority in her dark eyes. She wore a necklace of carved bone and turquoise. Water dripped from her raven-black hair down her neck to her chest. Chief Nayeli. Though he didn't yet know her name, her gaze didn't flicker. "Why are you on our land, lone rider?" Jacob tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. Rain washed mud down his face. I'm looking for someone," he rasped. "Lies." Nayeli stepped closer. "You carry no supplies, no horse, no weapon. You look like a man fleeing his own ghost." Jacob wanted to protest, but truth stung too sharply for him to deny it. Lightning clawed across the sky, illuminating their faces and revealing the terror he'd been trying to outrun. In that flash, Nayeli saw it. Something changed in her eyes. "Bind him," she ordered. Before Jacob could move, ropes tightened around his wrists. A blindfold pressed over his eyes. He heard the women's footsteps circling him, heard their low murmurs, felt their rough hands dragging him across rocks and sand. He tried to stay conscious, but the cold rain and exhaustion swallowed him whole. The last thing he felt was a woman's hand on his chest, not gentle, not cruel, just assessing, as if measuring whether he was worth saving. Then everything went. Dark. Jacob woke to heat. Not sunlight. Ireligt. He blinked into clarity and found himself in a vast canyon encampment, a hidden Apache stronghold tucked behind walls of red stone. Dozens of women moved around the camp, sharpening spears, boiling herbs, training young girls how to fight. No men. Not one. His pulse quickened. 2 women guarded him, one younger, sharp-eyed, with an arrow always half drawn. The other older, her silver hair braided with feathers, her gaze exhausted but thoughtful. Before he could speak, Nayeli stepped into the firelight. She looked different now, dry clothes, hair braided, face painted with black streaks of ceremony. Her posture carried unquestionable command. "You entered Forbidden's land," she said. "By our laws, you should die." Jacob swallowed. "Then why am I still breathing?" Nayeli studied him like a puzzle she didn't want to solve. "Because the storm brought you to us. The spirits may find meaning in this." Jacob frowned. "Meaning?" The older woman stepped forward. "I am Tansa, shaman of this tribe. We see omens in the sky. That lightning that struck moments before you appeared, it has not happened in 20 years. Nayeli's jaw tightened. "Still, storm or no storm, we do not keep men." That sentence landed like a stone. "Where are the men?" Jacob S.silence.nayel. I single quotes S eyes hardened. Gone. Taken. Killed. Betrayed. All of it. Jacob's breath felt heavy. I'm sorry. Nayeli stiffened as if the words offended her. We did not ask for sorrow. We asked for justice. A tense moment hung between them until a shout erupted from outside the camp. 3 women rushed toward the fire, dragging a blood-soaked young hunter. Her side was torn open, clawed by something massive, a mountain lion. One cried, "She is fading." Tansa dropped to her knees and tore open the girl's shirt to inspect the wound. Nayeli barked orders. But even she looked unsure fear beneath the warrior's steel. Jacob instinctively stepped forward. I can help. Every bow in the circle snapped toward him. Nayeli's voice cut like a blade. You speak again without permission. Listen to me. Jacob's voice cracked. My sister was a healer before she was taken. She taught me how to treat wounds. If you don't stop that bleeding, she'd die. Tansa hesitated. Nayeli's jaw clenched. She hated the idea of relying on a stranger, especially a man, but she hated losing her people more. Finally, she nodded once. Untie him. Jacob dropped to the young woman's side, hands trembling but steady with purpose. He tore strips of cloth, packed the wound with crushed herbs from the nearby satchel, tightened a bandage around her ribs, and pressed until the bleeding slowed. Minutes felt like years. Then finally, the girl's breathing steadied. Tansa exhaled a trembling breath. The entire camp relaxed. And Nayeli looked at Jacob differently, not with trust. No, she wasn't capable of that, but curiosity. And something deeper she didn't want to acknowledge. You saved her life, she said quietly. Jacob nodded, wiping blood from his hands. I just did what anyone should. Nayeli stepped closer, too close. Not anyone. Certainly not any man we've ever known. The fire crackled between them. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Soft now, like the storm was watching, and without warning, Nayeli reached out and touched the leather pouch hanging from Jacob's neck. What is this? She asked. He swallowed. A promise. Nayeli's eyes softened at the edges. We will see if you keep it. She turned sharply to the guards. He stays. Under watch. No harm. Jacob let out a slow breath. For the first time in years, he wasn't walking alone in the dark. Though he was technically a prisoner, a strange feeling tugged at him. Something was beginning, something none of them expected, and far above the canyon. The storm finally broke open a patch of sky, revealing the first star of the night. The morning sun burned through the red canyon walls, casting streaks of gold across the Apache encampment, but Jacob Holt did not move. His wrists were still bound by soft cords, token of trust more than imprisonment, but the ropes did little to restrain the whirlwind of thoughts racing through his mind. He had never expected to wake up, surrounded by women warriors, no men in sight, and yet here he was, alive. And more dangerously, he had begun to feel a strange connection to Nayeli. She moved through the camp like a shadow of authority, her every gesture precise, her dark eyes observing him like a hawk circling prey. Jacob rose cautiously, muscles stiff from the night spent on the cold earth. Tansa, the shaman, approached him with a bundle of herbs and a small clay bowl of water. Her gray hair caught the sunlight, haloed by the soft dawn. You must eat, she said, her voice calm but firm. You are strong, but even the strongest body fails without nourishment. Jacob took the bowl, noticing the way her hand shook slightly as she set it down. Thank you, he muttered. I never thought I'd be served breakfast by a tribe of women in the middle of nowhere. Tansa's lips twitched as if trying to smile. The world has ways of surprising you, Jacob Holt. Do not underestimate it or us. Before he could reply, Nayeli appeared behind Tansa, her gaze piercing. She did not speak at first, simply watched him as he lifted the bowl. The wind carried the scent of sage and smoked meat, mingling with the desert's dusty tang, and Jacob felt an odd stirring of calm despite the tension in her presence. "You will remain here," Nayeli said finally, "until you prove your worth." Jacob froze. "Prove my worth?" She lifted her chin. "Our tribe does not blindly trust outsiders. You saved a life yesterday. That is good. But strength, intelligence, loyalty, these are not proven in one act. You will undergo our trial." "The trial?" Jacob repeated, suddenly alert. "Yes." Nayeli's voice was unwavering. "You will survive 3 days in the canyon beyond our walls alone. There, you must find water, shelter, and your own food. You will return by nightfall of the 3rd day. If you fail, you will leave our land." Jacob swallowed hard. He had wandered the desert before, but the canyon she spoke of was rumored to be cursed, riddled with predators, quicksand, and narrow cliffs that had swallowed even the bravest Apache warriors years ago. "I accept," he said, trying to sound braver than he felt. Nayeli's eyes narrowed slightly, perhaps a flicker of surprise or respect. "Good. Tansa, prepare him." Tansa handed him a leather satchel filled with dried herbs, a flint, and a small knife. "Do not mistake simplicity for weakness. These are gifts, tools for survival. Use them wisely." Jacob nodded. "I won't fail." Tansa studied him a long moment. "Do not fail yourself either. That is far more important." With that, Nayeli led him to the edge of the canyon. The wind howled through jagged cliffs, carrying the sharp scent of sagebrush and whetstone. Jacob's stomach twisted with anticipation and fear. 3 days, Nayeli said. "No help, no exceptions. Return alive? Then we will see what kind of man you truly are." Jacob tightened the satchel against his chest and began his descent into the canyon, heart pounding. Every shadow seemed to whisper threats. Every rustle could be a predator. He navigated jagged rocks, cautious not to dislodge stones that might betray his path to those above. The first night came abruptly. The sun sank behind a jagged ridge, and the temperature dropped sharply. Jacob found a narrow overhang for shelter, layered with dried leaves he had collected. He tended to a small fire, breathing in the smoky aroma that mingled with the canyon's natural scents. Hours passed. The silence of the desert pressed against him like a physical weight. Then, a sound low growls echoing off the rocks. A pair of glowing eyes appeared in the firelight's distance. Jacob froze, hand tightening on the knife. The predator, a mountain lion, stalked closer, muscles rippling under its tawny coat. Jacob remembered the techniques his sister had taught him years ago. Never run, make yourself appear larger, use fire. He banged 2 sticks together and shouted. The lion paused, snarled, and then slowly retreated into the shadows. His pulse thundered, but he survived the first night. Day 2 brought more challenges. Jacob navigated narrow cliff edges, scrambled over loose boulders, and discovered a small stream trickling between rocks. He drank cautiously, cooling his parched throat, then filled a small container with water for later. Hunger gnawed at him, but he found edible roots and berries enough to sustain him for now. At midday, he heard voices. Not women's voices, but a low murmur he could not place. He hid behind a rock and peered into a small clearing. A band of outlaws had made camp, a man down by thirst, another sharpening a blade, laughing. Jacob realized that the canyon had not only tested him against nature, but against humans too. His heart raced. He had 2 choices, avoid them or confront them. Remembering Nayeli's eyes, those sharp, assessing eyes, he chose action. Under the cover of rock shadows, He scavenged a piece of rope and used his knife to cut a branch into a crude spear. That night, as the outlaws slept near the fire, Jacob crept forward, knocked the first man unconscious with a heavy stone, and quietly untied the second man from his bedroll. Using quick thinking, he forced both to flee into the canyon with warnings they would never forget. By the time Jacob returned to his overhang, exhausted, he realized that Nayeli's test was as much about intelligence and courage as physical endurance. And he felt, somewhere deep inside, a strange connection growing. He wanted her to see him survive, to earn not only her respect but something more. The third day arrived with a relentless sun. Jacob's body was sore, lips cracked, and hands blistered, but he pressed on. At midday, a sudden rock slide threatened to trap him. He dove behind a boulder just in time, narrowly escaping death. The canyon, it seemed, was determined to teach him humility. As the sun dipped low, painting the rocks in deep crimson, Jacob approached the camp. His legs trembled from fatigue, yet his mind was alight with a strange satisfaction. He had faced nature, predators, and outlaws and survived. When he entered the camp, Tansa rushed forward. Her eyes were wide with relief. "You returned, alive." Jacob nodded, too tired for words. Nayeli approached silently, her eyes unreadable. "You survived the trial," she said finally. "You have shown courage, resourcefulness, and strength. You may remain, for now." Jacob exhaled slowly. "Thank you. I won't disappoint you." Nayeli studied him. "Do not confuse survival with loyalty. You still have much to learn about this tribe and about yourself." Jacob's gaze met hers, a flicker of understanding passing between them. He realized that he did not just want to survive in this land. He wanted to belong. Later that night, around the campfire, the women celebrated quietly, the firelight reflecting in their eyes as they shared stories of battles and survival. Jacob listened, learning the ways of a world he had never truly known, learning courage, respect, and the fierce bond of women who had survived alone for generations. When the fire died down, Jacob walked toward the edge of the camp and looked up at the stars, thinking of the storm that had brought him here, the life he had left behind, and the uncertain future that now stretched before him. Nayeli appeared beside him without sound. He startled, but did not step back. "You did well," she said softly, her tone uncharacteristically gentle. "You might even live to earn the tribe's trust fully." Jacob's voice was hoarse. "And if I fail?" She smiled faintly, a rare, fleeting thing that revealed something vulnerable beneath a warrior's mask. "Then you will leave. But for now, you remain." The wind carried the scent of sage and earth. The stars sparkled like shards of ice above them. And for the first time since he had been captured, Jacob felt hope. Yet, in the shadows beyond the campfire's glow, a figure watched, silent, unseen, its intentions unknown. The trial had ended. But the true test, the one of heart, trust, and survival, was only beginning. Jacob Holt had survived the canyon trial, but when he returned to the Apache encampment, he discovered that survival did not guarantee safety. The camp was quiet, now too quiet. Even the usual hum of preparation, the sharp clatter of weapons, and the rustle of women moving through tents seemed absent. Tansa approached first, her face pale beneath the firelight's glow. "Jacob, something is wrong." He followed her cautiously to the center of the camp. There, he saw Nayeli standing in the circle of stones that marked the tribal council space. Her jaw was tight, her eyes sharper than the arrowheads they polished every dawn. Around her, a few of the younger warriors whispered nervously. "Tell me what happened," Jacob asked. Nayeli turned toward him, but her gaze shifted to the shadows beyond the fire. "The trial was only a beginning," she said. "We've sensed a change in the wind. A betrayal." Jacob's stomach tightened. A betrayal? Yes, Nayeli said. Someone here has been meeting with outsiders, traitors, mercenaries, men. And now, after your trial, the danger is closer than ever. I suspect tonight is when we will learn who it is. Tansa approached, placing a hand on Jacob's shoulder. You survived the canyon, yes. But the heart of the tribe, its safety, is under threat. You may need to act, Jacob. The test is not only of survival. It is of loyalty. Jacob nodded. Then I will help. Tell me what to do. Nayeli's lips curved into a faint smile, almost hidden by the firelight. Watch, learn, and do not interfere unless you must. Night fell like a velvet cloak, and the camp's torches cast long shadows across the stone walls. Jacob noticed movement along the ridges. Two figures, cloaked in darkness, approached the camp silently. Outsiders, Nayeli whispered, pointing toward the ridge. And they do not expect resistance. Jacob's hands clenched. Though he was no warrior like the Apache women, his instinct was sharp. Honed from years wandering the desert alone. Suddenly, a figure leapt from the shadows, a young woman from the tribe carrying a satchel of herbs. She stumbled as one of the outsiders grabbed her arm. Help! She screamed, but the sound barely reached the camp. Jacob acted before he even thought. He sprinted across the open ground, picking up a fallen branch and swinging it at the man. The attacker staggered back, surprised by the strength in a man the tribe had barely trusted. Nayeli and the other warriors arrived in moments, bows raised and arrows aimed. The second outsider froze, realizing he faced not only Nayeli but the entire camp. He dropped his weapon and ran, leaving his partner grappling with Jacob. Together, Jacob and Nayeli subdued the intruder. The young woman collapsed to the ground, shaking, but unharmed. Why did you risk yourself? Nayeli asked, breathing hard, her dark hair plastered to her face by sweat. Jacob met her gaze steadily. Because someone needed to act. And because I am no longer just a stranger. Tansa stepped forward, inspecting the captured outsider. He is a traitor from the east, sent to steal our maps and knowledge of the canyon. But he was not acting alone. This is only the beginning. Nayeli's eyes darkened. We will not be caught unprepared. The tribe must be ready for what comes next. Jacob, you have proven your courage once more. But loyalty cannot be forced, it must be earned. And tonight, you have earned it. For the first time, Jacob felt a sense of belonging. The adrenaline of survival and defense had forged a bond, fragile but real, with the women who had once held him captive. The following day, the camp buzzed with activity. Nayeli called a council, her voice ringing with authority. From now on, she said, we must increase our vigilance. We are vulnerable only when we assume safety. Tansa added, Jacob Holt will stay with us. His skills in survival, healing, and observation are needed. But trust is earned through action. Jacob bowed slightly, aware of the weight of her words. I will not betray that trust. As the day wore on, Jacob found himself alone with Nayeli near the river that ran through the canyon floor. Water gurgled over rocks, carrying the smell of wet earth and pine. You risked your life last night, Nayeli said, her tone softer than he had ever heard. Why? Jacob shrugged, though his heart raced. Because I could not let her be taken. And because I have nothing left to lose. Not anymore, except. Maybe this, he added, gesturing vaguely toward the camp. Nayeli's eyes softened, though her warrior's mask did not falter. We are not used to men who act without thinking of themselves. You are different. Strange, in ways I cannot yet understand. Jacob laughed softly. Different because I've had to survive alone. I've known hunger, fear, and loss. I've had nothing and no one. Until now, the river's gentle murmur filled the silence between them. For a moment, The world seemed distant, the canyon, the camp. The tribe's struggles all reduced to the sound of water and the space between two people learning to trust. But that peace was broken when Tansa appeared. Her expression grave. "Nayeli," she said. "You must see this." The two women led Jacob to the edge of the canyon where fresh tracks marred the sand. The prints were large, irregular, and unmistakable. A group of men had passed through recently, moving fast, leaving signs of intent. "They are coming," Nayeli said quietly, her eyes scanning the horizon. "And they will not leave empty-handed." Jacob Holt. You must prepare. Over the next 2 days, the camp transformed. The women sharpened spears, crafted traps, and practiced combat drills. Jacob worked alongside them, learning quickly. He constructed water traps, reinforced barriers, and set up rudimentary alarms. Every moment, he felt the weight of responsibility, of belonging, of loyalty, of the trust Nayeli and the tribe had placed in him. On the third night, the attackers arrived. Under the cover of darkness, figures moved along the ridge, whispering, unaware that the camp was ready. Jacob's heart pounded as he watched Nayeli signal with subtle hand movements. Women warriors emerged silently from shadows, arrows nocked and ready. The night erupted into chaos. Jacob acted instinctively, using firebrands to create confusion and help block the attacker's path. Spears and arrows flew, the sound of battle echoing off canyon walls. Amidst the fray, Jacob spotted a man trying to flank Nayeli. With a roar, he tackled the intruder, pinning him to the ground until the warrior women arrived. When the fight ended, silence fell like a shroud over the canyon. The attackers had fled or surrendered. The camp had survived, and so had Jacob, standing amid the firelight, sweat and blood on his face, breathing heavily, yet alive. Nayeli approached him, her dark eyes assessing. "You have proven more than courage," she said. "You have proven loyalty. You may stay, Jacob Holt. You may finally belong." Jacob exhaled, his chest tight with relief and pride. He looked around at the women who had once held him captive and now fought alongside him. They were strong, fierce, unyielding, and yet, he realized, they were also family. Later that night, he found Tansa sitting by the dying fire, preparing herbs. "You are not like other men," she said quietly, "and perhaps that is why you were brought here. Not by chance, but by fate." Jacob nodded, staring into the flames. "I feel it too. This place, these people. It feels like home." Tansa smiled faintly. "Then you must continue to earn it. But tonight, rest. Tomorrow brings new challenges, and with them, new opportunities." Jacob glanced up at the stars, a faint breeze rustling the canyon walls. Somewhere in the shadows, he knew threats still lingered. And yet, for the first time in years, he felt hope, purpose, and the beginnings of something he had never thought he would find again, trust. And standing quietly in the distance, Nayeli watched him with a mixture of pride, caution, and something that Jacob could not yet name, but felt stirring deep inside him. The trials of the canyon had ended, but the trials of the heart and of belonging were only just beginning. The sun rose over the canyon like molten gold, spilling light across the camp. Jacob Holt stood at the edge of the ridge, surveying the landscape. The night had passed without incident, but he knew the danger was far from over. The outlaws who had attempted to infiltrate the tribe's lands were likely regrouping, plotting a return. Nayeli appeared beside him, her silhouette strong against the dawn. Her eyes were focused, calculating. "They will come again," she said quietly. "And next time, they will not hesitate to take lives." Jacob swallowed. "Then we'll be ready. We've strengthened the camp, trained the young warriors, and—" he paused, looking down at the women preparing traps. "We have each other." Nayeli's gaze softened for a fraction of a second. You speak boldly for a man who was captured barely a week ago. I speak boldly because I've learned quickly, Jacob replied. I've learned what it means to fight for something that matters. For people who matter. Tansa joined them, her gray hair glinting in the early sunlight. She carried a small satchel of dried herbs. And perhaps, she said, you have learned something about yourself as well. Jacob nodded slowly. I have, more than I realized I could. Nayeli didn't respond, only nodded once, her expression unreadable. But Jacob thought he saw a glimmer of pride in her eyes, a rare acknowledgment from the chief of a tribe that had known no men for decades. By midday, the camp was alive with activity. Women practiced combat drills, young girls learned the ways of survival, and Jacob moved among them, helping where he could. He carried water, reinforced barriers, and taught a few defensive strategies he had learned during his desert wanderings. For the first time in his life, he felt useful, truly part of something bigger than himself. But even in this brief peace, Jacob could feel tension simmering. There were whispers among the younger warriors about the outsider who had been captured, rumors about mercenaries from the east, and unease about the safety of the canyon itself. Tansa approached him as he repaired a fence near the river. Jacob, the tribe senses something. A presence that watches, hidden yet very near. Jacob frowned. A spy? Perhaps, Tansa said. Or perhaps the spirits testing your resolve. The trial of courage is never truly over. You must be ready for the unexpected. Jacob clenched his jaw. He had survived mountains, predators, and outlaws. What more could this desert possibly throw at him? As evening approached, a distant sound carried across the canyon, a rumbling, unnatural, and deliberate. Nayeli's face hardened as she listened. She motioned for Jacob and Tansa to follow her to the council circle. They are here, Nayeli said, her voice low but commanding. The men who tried to infiltrate our camp, they've brought reinforcements. Perhaps hundreds. Jacob's eyes widened. Hundreds? Nayeli nodded grimly. If they breach the canyon, they will take everything. Our people, our homes, and our knowledge. Tansa stepped forward. Jacob, the tribe must act strategically. You have survived every test so far, and your mind is sharp. Will you stand with us in the front line? Jacob exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. I will. I owe you this. The night fell quickly, bringing with it the chill of the canyon. Shadows stretched long, and the first distant figures appeared on the ridge's horses. Men, and dark shapes moving with lethal intent. Nayeli gave the signal, and the women warriors emerged from concealment like shadows themselves, their bows drawn, arrows glinting. Jacob moved to the forefront, spear in hand, heart pounding with anticipation and fear. The attackers advanced. Dust swirled around their boots, and their laughter carried over the canyon. But the Apache women, silent and deadly, struck first. Arrows rained down from hidden ledges. Men and horses faltered. Chaos erupted, dust and screams mixing with the sharp twang of bowstrings and the shouts of battle. Jacob fought alongside them, using his spear and instincts to block and disarm attackers. He had never been trained in combat like Nayeli or the other women, but he moved with precision, improvising traps and using the terrain to his advantage. Amidst the chaos, Jacob spotted one of the attackers trying to flank Nayeli. Without hesitation, he charged, tackling the man to the ground. Nayeli's eyes briefly met his, a spark of gratitude passing between them. Together, they subdued the intruder, and Jacob realized he was no longer an outsider. He was part of this tribe fighting for survival, for honor, and for something that had grown deeper than respect. The battle raged until the attackers finally began to retreat. realizing they could not overcome the women's strategy and ferocity. Silence fell over the canyon once more, broken only by the crackle of small fires and the heavy breathing of survivors. Jacob collapsed near the river, drenched in sweat and covered in dust. Tansa approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You have done well," she said. "Your courage and your loyalty have proven your place among us." Nayeli appeared beside him, her dark hair damp with sweat, her chest heaving. "You did not falter, Jacob Holt. You did not hesitate when it mattered most. That is worth more than any test, any trial." Jacob looked at her, the canyon moonlight reflecting in her eyes. "And you," he said, voice hoarse, "have shown me what it means to belong." Nayeli's expression softened, just for a heartbeat. Then she stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "You are no longer a stranger. You are one of us." For the first time since he had arrived in the canyon, Jacob allowed himself to feel whole. He had survived the desert, the storm, the trials, and the attacks. He had earned trust, respect, and a place in a community that had once seemed impossible to penetrate. In the days that followed, life returned to a cautious normal. Jacob worked alongside the women, learning more of their ways, their rituals, and their stories. He helped Tansa prepare medicine, repair homes, and teach survival skills to the younger girls. He trained with Nayeli, learning how to move silently, how to anticipate danger, and how to fight as part of a team. Over time, a bond grew between Jacob and Nayeli. It was not immediate, and it was not simple. There were moments of tension, moments of misunderstanding, but also moments of connection, shared glances, quiet conversations near the fire, and the occasional smile that spoke of mutual respect and something deeper, something unspoken yet undeniable. One evening, Jacob sat by the fire, watching the women and girls laugh and share stories. Nayeli joined him, sitting silently beside him. "Do you ever think about leaving?" she asked. Jacob shook his head. "No, not anymore. I've wandered the desert alone for too long. Here, I am part of something, part of people who matter, part of a family I never expected." Nayeli's eyes softened. "Then you are welcome here, truly." He turned to look at her. "And you?" Her gaze met his, steady and unwavering. "I have my duty, but perhaps it is easier to trust someone who has already proven they will not abandon it." Jacob smiled faintly. "I won't abandon it. I won't abandon you, or this tribe." For the first time in years, Jacob felt peace. The trials, the danger, the fear, they were not gone. But they had shaped him, and he had emerged stronger, wiser, and surrounded by people who respected and trusted him. Weeks later, the canyon was quiet again. The threat of outsiders had passed for now, and the tribe thrived under Nayeli's leadership. Jacob walked through the camp, carrying water to the women as they trained and prepared for the future. He had earned a place here, not by chance, but by courage, loyalty, and perseverance. Tansa approached, smiling faintly. "You have done more than survive, Jacob. You have become part of this tribe. That is a rare gift." Jacob nodded. "I feel it. Every day." Nayeli joined them, her eyes scanning the horizon. She looked at Jacob, a mixture of pride, respect, and something more that words could not capture. "You came to us a stranger," she said softly, "and you stayed as a man who belongs." Jacob's gaze met hers. "And I will stay, always." The wind rustled through the canyon, carrying the scent of sage, fire, and earth. The stars emerged overhead, brilliant against the dark sky. For the first time in his life, Jacob Holt felt at home. He had survived storms, predators, betrayal, and war. He had earned trust, respect, and love. And in the heart of the Apache women's tribe, he had found something far more precious than survival, belonging. and as the camp settled for the night, Jacob sat beside Nayeli and Tansa, watching the flames flicker, knowing that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The trials had ended. The danger had passed, and a new life had begun, one forged in courage, loyalty, and the unexpected power of connection. Jacob Holt was no longer a lonely man. He had won every woman's heart not through conquest, but through trust, courage, and unwavering dedication. And in the quiet strength of the canyon, he had finally found a family and a home that he would never leave.